Why is there no love for the Byzantine Empire? That is what we will be discussing on today's short midweek episode. Now, before we get to all that, please make sure to like the video, leave a comment, subscribe if you are new, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss another video. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcast or Google Play, please leave us a follow. And if you are listening on Apple Podcast especially, please leave a 5-star review. Now, before we get into this, I wanted to read a comment from a video we got here. This was from our video Nestorianism Explained. So if you haven't watched that already, please go do so. It's quite good. But this comment was left by Jesus Christ is my God to the glory of the Father. He says, "You should not talk immediately after you eat. You mostly snort and stammer with your speech." Thank you. Appreciate that. "You have no real historical understanding of what Nestorius actually said." Nestorius is spelled wrong. "Because his books were burned and he was banished before he could defend himself." Now, I do want to point out that it is true that some of Nestorius's writings were burned, but not all of them were. So there is some historical record that remains of what he wrote. And even were it true that none of the writings of Nestorius remained, I mean, are we just supposed to not talk about him? I don't see the value in not, we have to operate based on something. We have to operate based on the best available evidence. And as I say, not all of his writings were burned, although it is true that some of his writings were burned. I don't mean to say that they were not, but thank you for the comment. That'll help boost us in terms of the YouTube algorithm, and it gives us, it's something interesting. You don't, the YouTube comment section can be an interesting place, and so I'm more than happy to address any comments you leave on videos. But yeah, definitely do go check out the Nestorianism Explained video. It is rather good. Now, to get to our topic today, I was thinking about this. We in the midweek videos, we've done a lot of church history. We've talked about a number of heresies. We've talked about a number of church fathers. I wanted to take an episode to kind of address this trend that I see in the historical realm, sort almost, you wouldn't call it historiography, but in terms of the historical trends, I have noticed, and others I think have commented on this as well, that Byzantine history is not quite as popular as other kinds of history from this time period. We're talking, classical Roman history, the late Republic, as well as the early Empire, going up to really like the Pax Romana, up to about the 5 good emperors. That's a very popular portion of Roman history. And then I would say as well, medieval history is gaining in popularity these days. I would say especially Crusades history seems to be getting, there's a really good YouTube channel out there called Real Crusades History. You guys, if you like this channel, I'd recommend checking out Real Crusades History, because that channel does a lot of excellent work on not just the history of the Crusades, but a lot of other aspects of medieval history as well. That guy does an excellent job. So it's another channel you can check out if you're interested in this kind of material. But so I was thinking about this, and I tried to come up with why is this? Why is it that Byzantine history is not quite as popular as more broad ancient or medieval history? I was talking this over with my dad earlier today, who's, as I've said, my father is a historian, so that's where I get the history gene from, I guess. But so one thing that I thought of is, first of all, we here in the Anglosphere, countries that speak English, the United States, Canada, Britain, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. I've seen actually through the statistics on Podbean for our podcast that we do have some listeners from Australia and New Zealand. So thank you for listening. It's really cool that people are listening to this from all the way across the world. So we here in the Anglosphere, we come from a more Western tradition, meaning our tradition, whether it's cultural, literature, as well as our history, comes from Western Europe. So we're going to have more of a focus on England, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, even though Germany's kind of technically Central Europe, but the England, France, Spain, etc. That is going to be the focus of our tradition because we are a Western people, right? As opposed to, I think, if you were more Eastern, and when I say Eastern, I mean like Eastern European, you might have more of your focus on Eastern history, and Byzantine is more Eastern than it is Western. So I think part of it is that we here in the English-speaking world, as I said, the Anglosphere, we come from a Western tradition, and Byzantine is more of an Eastern tradition. And that kind of segues nicely into another point, which is that there actually has been a decent amount of history written, a decent amount of scholarship conducted on Byzantine history, but a lot of it is Russian, because obviously the Russians get a good amount of cultural heritage from the Byzantines, most notably their Eastern Orthodox Christianity they get from the Byzantines. And the thing with that, well, so there is scholarship done on Byzantine history, but okay, so just so it's Russian. But the issue with that for us here is that that scholarship then has to be translated into English, right? Most of us do not speak Russian. Most of us cannot read Russian. So we would need some form of translation of the scholarship in Byzantine history from Russian into English, which we don't have a lot of at the moment. Hopefully as time goes on, you'll get more translations and to see what the Russians have to say about Byzantine history. I'm sure it would be very interesting. The Russians do have a knack for writing. Certainly, if you've ever picked up a book by a Russian author like Dostoevsky, very, very thick books. But so that's another reason why Byzantine history, I think, is not quite as popular here in the West as it might be in other places. Another thing is the linguistic issue. Obviously, most Byzantine history is going to be written, right? So when you go to do scholarship, when you go to do historical scholarship, what sets apart, professional historians from someone like me, I'm not a professionally trained historian, more of an amateur historian, but I cannot read the original source material in the original language. When you go and you train to be a historian, what a big part of what you're doing there is you're learning to read the original sources in the original language. And so for the Byzantines, that's going to be New Testament Greek, or what's also called Koine Greek. Now, that involves learning a different alphabet than the Latin alphabet. It involves reading manuscripts, which are very difficult to read. I've examined some Western manuscripts, I believe some Frankish manuscripts in my day, and just parsing out letters can be very difficult. Trying to parse out, is that an A? Is that an O? Is that a Q? Why does it have a tail? Right? These are all things that you have to learn to work with when you're reading ancient and medieval manuscripts. And because Koine Greek does not use the Latin alphabet, right? Obviously, Greek is written in a different alphabet than English, French, Spanish, Italian, German, Portuguese, etc. And that's a barrier to people being able to conduct scholarship about the Byzantines. And just generally speaking, the more difficult the linguistics are for studying a particular kind of history, the less people you will have who will study it. This is why, for example, medieval Russian history would be very difficult, because not only is there not as much written material on that time period as there are for other time periods, but then you also have to learn either Old Slavonic, or you have to learn a medieval form of a Cyrillic alphabet, and then have to learn to read somebody's handwriting in that, and that's very difficult. And then as well, there is a bit of a religious aspect to this. So one might say, well, you know, the classical Roman history of Rome of Julius Caesar and Octavian and Trajan and Hadrian, well, that's very popular. And as we've talked about on the show, well, the Byzantines are still Roman, right? We talk about, we've just wrapped up the fall of Rome here, but the Roman Empire still lives on in the East. It just doesn't have Rome as its capital. And as I've talked about before, it's worth reiterating that the Byzantines think of it themselves as Roman. They don't think of the word Byzantine is not used by the Byzantines to describe themselves. That's a term invented by, I think, mostly English historians in the 19th century. But so why is it then that the Byzantines, if they are Roman, why is this just not considered part of Roman history? Well, there were a number of vogue intellectuals from the Enlightenment period who were mostly atheists, thinking about a guy like Edward Gibbon. Voltaire was another one, who were attempting to separate pagan Rome from Christian Rome. And what they were essentially were trying to say, and it's not dissimilar to what we were as somewhat talking about when we did our brief look into the City of God, which you can go back and read I was reading City of God. You guys can listen to our episode on St. Augustine and his great work, The City of God. But it's this idea that Christian Rome was on a decline, and that Rome declines because of its Christianity. And I think that, well, I know that guys like Edward Gibbon and Voltaire and these other people tried to, Lars Brownworth makes this case it's not even really a case you have to make. It's just, I think it's more of a matter of fact in a lecture that he did at the Smithsonian years ago, but that they were trying to separate Rome. They're trying to separate the later Christian Romans away from the pagan Romans, and saying this classical Roman pagans, these are the good Romans, and then these silly, backwards Christian Romans, they're the bad Romans, and we're not even going to call them Romans. We're going to come up with this new word, Byzantine, for them. And so I think that is another part of it. You're separating various popular aspects of Roman history from various aspects of Roman history that have sort of declined in popularity, which really is too bad, because as I've been doing this show, doing this lecture series, roughly speaking, I find this stuff really fascinating. I took 2 semesters of Byzantine history in college, studied a number of these issues in other classes as well. And it's all very fascinating. This is all very interesting history. And it's unfortunate that we are in a time where historical trends in terms of what people are studying, Byzantine history, is kind of on the sideline. And obviously that's not to say that other forms of history are not good to study as well, but this is a good kind of history to study. And I think we should be studying it more. And that's partly why I'm doing this series, because I want to bring more attention to what I see as a really interesting and really valuable kind of history. So that's going to wrap up today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you got this far in the video, please make sure to leave a like. You can also leave a comment down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. Also, be sure, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Google Play, to give us a follow. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please make sure to leave a 5-star review. You can also find us on Instagram. The name of the Instagram account is still, well, the username, the @ when you @ me, it will now be Professor Wren, but the title on the page is still academics. It says that I need to wait longer to change it, but we will be changing it, as I said before. So if you search Professor Wren, it should come up. And then we are on Facebook as well at Professor Wren. Type it in, you can find it. And on those, I will be posting updates about the show, various other fun things I find about ancient, medieval, and Byzantine history. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.